Good afternoon, class, and welcome back to our online class initiated by Rishiram Shikshan Sansthan, Joshara, Uttarkashi, Manera. And today's subject is economics for class 12th. And in the previous video, there was some inconvenience due to which we could not complete the questions. So I would just like to again start with that questions where we have where we were stuck at the last moment. So that the question was that we had to calculate NDP at FC, net domestic product at factor cost. And the questions were rent, royalty, interest, wages and salaries, profit, mixed income, depreciation, and employer's contribution. Employer's contribution employer's contribution to social security scheme, or you can directly say social security scheme. And these were rupees in crore, and it was for rent 1400, for royalty it was 200, interest 1500, 800 wages and salaries, profit was 500, mixed income was 1000, and depreciation 70, and contribution to social security scheme is 200. So this was the question that we had incompleted in the last video. So first of all, to calculate NDP and FC, net domestic product at factor cost, we know that NDP at FC is equals to, these are sum of all the compensation of employee plus operating surplus plus mixed income. So this is just a simple question. We will just start simple with a simple question that we have to calculate NDP at FC. So if the sum of, or we can say that NDP at FC, net domestic product at factor cost, is compensation of employee plus operating surplus plus mixed income. So now here, if we see in the question, compensation of employee is not given as a whole product of compensation of employee. It is given by the direct means. For example, if you see in this, wages and salaries is included in compensation of employee. Second, employer's contribution to social security scheme, this also includes in compensation of employee. And other, if you see rent, royalty, interest and profit, these are the components, or we can say, of operating surplus. So the operating surplus is not particularly given, or we can say not simply given the operating surplus. These are given by the mode or by the mean of rent, royalty, interest and profit. So we have to calculate individually. So if we take compensation of employee, that we said that it is equals to the wages and salaries plus our employer's contribution to social security scheme, or we can in short form we can write. So this is the sum of our compensation of employee. After that, if we see the components of operating surplus, so operating surplus, we know that rent, royalty, interest and profit, these are operating surplus. So these are rent, royalty, interest and profit. So now these are the components of operating surplus. Now mixed income, if you see in the question, mixed income is given here directly. So we do not have to find out whether it is the incorporated circle, incorporated entrepreneurship, or whether it is the workers, where we have discussed in the earlier videos. So mixed income is given here directly. So we will write plus MI. So putting down the values of these, compensation of employee plus operating surplus, then we can calculate our NDP at FC, that is net domestic product at factor cost. So if you put the values, wages and salaries is 800 plus employer's contribution is 200 plus operating surplus, rent is our 1400 plus royalty is 200 plus interest is 1500 and plus profit is 500 plus our mixed income is 1000. So after this you can calculate in your notebook at your home. So we'll start another question. So the concept of this calculation by income method becomes easier. So I have put down the values so you can calculate in your home or in your notebook. Now let us go to the next question. Sometimes students, the questions may be complicated, or we can say it is given in a tricky manner, which you have to understand that what you have to find out and in which method you have to find out. So now let us approach another question, that calculation. Now let us calculate this national income. So calculate national income. So we have to calculate national income. Calculate national income. Now, national income, the formula for national income is that NNP at FC. Means the question says, when the question says calculate national income, means you have to calculate NNP at FC. This is our national income, net national product at factor cost. So we have to calculate NNP at FC. Now, the particulars here are first is depreciation. Second is NIT or net indirect tax. Third is rent and royalty. Fourth is our factor income. Received from row. Fifth is factor income paid. Abroad. Sixth is subsidies. Seventh is income from domestic product occurring to private sector, or in short we can write PVT sector. And eighth is income from domestic product occurring to government or public sector. Public sector. So those students, Akshita Badani, 2 times. So those students who are watching it live, please, you also take a notebook with you and solve the question with me so that it becomes easier for you to understand. Now depreciation, the value of depreciation here is around 50,000. The value of indirect taxes is here 7,000. Value of rent and royalty here is 6,000. Factor income paid from abroad is around 10,000. Factor income paid abroad is 6,000. Subsidies. Subsidies are 2,000, and income from domestic product occurring is around 70,000, and income from domestic from government and public sector is around 25,000. So now this is the question here. How will we calculate NNP, or we can say net national product at factor cost? So we know that NDP at FC, NDP at FC, NDP at FC is equals to our subsidies seventh, seventh income from domestic product plus income from domestic occurring from the private sector. So that is our NDP at FC. So we can simply write as is equals to 7 plus 8. This is our NDP. 7 income from domestic product occurring to private sector, and income from domestic product occurring to government or public sector. So this is our NDP at FC. Now if we put the values of here, 70,000 plus 25,000. So NDP at FC is our around 95,000. 95,000 is the value of NDP at FC, net domestic product at factor cost. Now after that, now we have calculated NDP at FC. Now what we have to do to calculate N will be N, or we can say net will be net. Now we have to convert domestic into national. So domestic income, to convert domestic income to national income, we have to add in domestic income net factor income earned from abroad, so that it domestic can be converted into national income. And so NNP at FC, we have NDP at FC, net domestic product at factor cost. In this, to just convert the domestic income, we have to convert domestic income into national income. For that, we have to add net factor income earned from abroad. So NFIA from abroad. So now net factor income from abroad is factor income received from row. The factor income received from row minus factor income paid abroad. So this will be our, now NFIA is not directly given here. So how we calculate NFIA, how we take means how we calculate net factor income earned from abroad is that the factor income received from row, the factor income that is received from row minus the factor income paid abroad. This will include our NFIA. So we know that NDP at FC that we have calculated and got around rupees 95,000 plus net factor income 10,000 minus factor 6,000. So if we calculate this, 95,000 plus 4,000, so around 99,000 crore. 99,000 crore is our net national income, or we can say 99,000 is our national income. Now moving on to the next question. So the next question here is we'll take another question which is most important, let's say. uh, Now, sometimes in the question, as told, the pure whole component is not given, so we have to calculate those out. Now, if we take another question, in this, and some points which you have to remember. For example, in the particulars, if MI mixed income is not given, sometimes in the question mixed income is not given. So what we have to do, we have to consider mixed income is equals to 0 because there's no value given for that. So therefore, we'll take mixed income as 0. These points you have to remember, and now let us take this, calculate the operating surplus. Now from the questions, now we know that NDP at FC, NDP at FC is equals to compensation of employee plus operating surplus plus mixed income. So now the question here will be a bit of tricky, where you have to calculate operating surplus. Now operating surplus is not given here. So the question is, so we have to calculate operating surplus. So the particular here are sales, second is compensation of employees, third is intermediate consumption, fourth is rent, fifth is net indirect tax, sixth is consumption of fixed capital, consumption of fixed capital, seventh is mixed income. And the values here are given in rupees in crore. Sales is around 4,000. Compensation of employee is around 800. Intermediate consumption is around 600. Rent here is around 400. Net indirect tax is 500 here. Consumption of fixed capital is 200. And mixed income is around 1400. 1400. Now, this is the question. Now, what we have to do in this question is that we have to calculate operating surplus. Now, we know that NDB at FC is equals to our compensation of employee plus operating surplus plus mixed income. Now, the mixed income is here given. Now, we have to find out operating surplus from the given question. So, for that, what we have to first take out, that we have to find out gross value of output at factor cost. So gross value, because in the question sales is given and intermediate consumption is given. So first what we have to do, we have to calculate gross value of output at market price. Now we know that gross value of output at MP is equals to sales plus intermediate consumption. So this is equals to our sales plus intermediate consumption, or we can simply write as IC. Now in the question sales is given here, and intermediate consumption is given. So we will find out gross value of output at market price. So if we put the values here, sales is around 4,000 plus intermediate consumption is around 600. So if we sum up these, this will be around 4,600. So now this 4,600 is our gross value of output at market price. Now we have calculated gross value. After finding out the gross value, now we have to calculate GDP, gross domestic product at market price. So gross domestic product at market price, that is equals to GVO at MP minus IC. Just before proceeding, let's just correct this. Gross value of output at market price is equals to sales plus change in stock. Sorry, here it will be change in stock. Change in stock. Now, change in stock, here is change in stock is our not given in the question. So therefore, we will include change in stock as 0 or the value will be 0. So here it will be around 4,000. So gross value and gross value of output at market price is equals to sales plus change in stock, but change in stock is not given in the question. So therefore, we will consider change in stock as 0 and sum of the value of this sales plus change and it will be around 4,000. So gross value of output at market price is 4,000. After getting that, we have to calculate gross domestic product at market price. Now we know that, so that's why I told you earlier, students, that you have to memorize the formulas by heart so that you can solve such kinds of problem. Otherwise, you yourself will be in a problem before solving these questions. Now, after calculating gross value of output at market price, now we have to calculate GDP at MP. Why? Because we have calculated gross value of output at market price plus intermediate consumption is given here. So if we take the value of gross value of market price GVO MP minus intermediate consumption. So the value of intermediate consumption is given here is 600. So 600. So if we subtract 4,000, if we minus this, it will be around 3,400. 3,400 will be our GDP at MP. Now, after calculating GDP at MP, we have to find NDP at FC. NDP at FC means net domestic product at factor cost. So now what we have to do, we have to convert gross into national and domestic will be our domestic, but market price will be converted into factor cost. So to convert national into gross, or we can say gross is always included with depreciation. So now in NDP at FC, what we will do, we have to from GDP we have to subtract depreciation so that we get net, or we can say net domestic product. So the here it will be NDP at FC will be our GDP at MP minus depreciation minus NIT. Now why we are subtracting NIT? We have told earlier, we have discussed the basic three concept or the concept of aggregate related to calculation of national income, that how to convert factor price into market price. So now market price has to be converted into factor cost. So therefore we are subtracting indirect tax, net indirect tax, plus gross should be now converted into net, so we are subtracting depreciation. Now if we look at the question, depreciation, here is our depreciation is given sales compensation of employers, now depreciation, as told earlier, that consumption of fixed capital, the other name for depreciation is also called consumption of fixed capital. The other name for this is also depreciation. So now consumption, here we have calculated 3,400 around our GDP at MP minus depreciation. The another name for depreciation is consumption of fixed capital. So that is the value of depreciation is around 200 minus NIT, net indirect tax, which is directly given here, is around 500. So if we solve this, we will get around 2700 crore will be our NDP at FC. Now we have converted market price into factor cost and gross into net. After that, then we have to calculate NDP at FC. Now we have all the values here. We have obtained all the values. We have got NDP at FC. We have compensation of employee given in the question and operating surplus not given, but mixed income, though mixed income is given here. Now we will calculate NDP at FC and we will go or we will proceed like this. So now to calculate NDP at FC, we have got NDP at FC around 2700. Compensation of employee are compensation of employee is given here directly. So we will put directly in it. That is around 800 plus operating surplus is not given. We have to find out operating surplus. Mixed income is around 1400. So now if we put operating surplus here, so 18 plus 14, it will be around 22. So 2700 minus 2200. This will be around 500 crore. So now 500 crore is our operating surplus. Now we have calculated operating surplus. I hope so you understand, you understood the sequence that how to calculate and how to find out the components which are missing from the questions. Now proceeding to another question, let us understand another question. So now calculate net domestic product at market price from the following data. Now let us calculate GNP at MP, or you can say gross national product at market price. GNP at MP. Now we have to calculate GNP at NP, and the particulars here are, I will write in the particulars will be written in a shortcut method. So please, compensation of employee, interest, consumption of fixed capital, after that opening stock, subsidies, closing stock, mixed income, we can say mixed income of self-employed, employer's contribution, to social security scheme, And net factor income earned from abroad, NFIA, and rent and indirect tax. Indirect tax or taxes, we can say GST. So these are the particulars, and the values of these particulars are 220 for the profit, compensation of employees around 350, interest is around 100, consumption of fixed capital, or we can say consumption of fixed capital. The other name for consumption of fixed capital that you have to keep in mind is depreciation. This is also called as depreciation. So we can say depreciation is around 50. And opening stock is around 30. एक दो तीन. Profit, compensation, interest, consumption 30, subsidies is around 20, and closing stock is around 50, mixed income is around 150, employees contribution is around 30, and net factor income earned from abroad is 10, rent is 80, and indirect taxes is around 90. So these are the values. These are the values of these particulars. Now what we have to calculate? We have to calculate GNP, gross national product, at market price. Gross national product at market price. GNP at MP. So first what we know is that we have to calculate NDP at FC, or we can say net domestic product at factor cost. So NDP at FC, we all know that NDP at FC is equals to consumption of compensation of employees, or we can say COE, compensation of employees, plus the operating surplus, plus the mixed income. Now compensation of employee, here is directly given, the compensation of employee, but sometimes in question what happens, they write wages and salaries, sometimes they may give wages in kind also. So then we have to sum up wages and salaries plus wages and kind. But here in the question, the compensation of employee is directly given, so we directly put the values of compensation of employee. So compensation of employee is around 350. Now operating surplus, the components of operating surplus, that is profit, interest, and rent. So these are the components of operating surplus. So we have to see out the components of all the factors, whether it is of compensation of employee, or whether it is of operating surplus, or whether it is of mixed income. So we have to find out those components. Now we know that compensation of employee here is directly given as 350, but the operating surplus component here are, we can say, profit plus interest plus rent. So these profit, interest, and rent, these are the component of operating surplus, and plus mixed income. If you see that mixed income of self-employee is directly given here, so we do not have to find its component out. So we just put the value of mixed income. So that mixed income value here given is 150. So if we solve this, 350 plus profit is equals to 220, plus interest is equals to 100, and rent is around 80, Rent is around 80 plus 150. Now if we solve these, we will get around 900 rupees in crore. Now this is NDP at FC. We have calculated now NDP at FC, that is 900 rupees crore. After that we have to calculate GNP, gross national product at market price. So what we have to do, from this NDP at FC, from this NDP at FC, we have to convert net into gross, domestic into net, and factor into market price. So these things we have to do. These three things we have to put up. Now to convert gross, to convert net into gross. So gross always includes depreciation. So therefore we will add depreciation here, because we have to convert net into gross. So to convert net into gross, we have to add depreciation to it. If we want to calculate, let's say NDP, let's just for example NDP, we have to calculate GNP. So here what we will do, from gross already includes depreciation. So what we will do, we will just subtract here depreciation. So you have to remember the concept, when we have to include and when we have to exclude. Now so to convert net into gross, we include depreciation. So depreciation will be included in it. Second is domestic to national. To convert domestic income to national income, we have to add net factor income earned from abroad. So means we have to include NFIA. NFIA we have to include it. Now to convert factor cost into market price. Now we have to convert factor cost into market price. So to convert factor cost into market price, what we have to do? We have to add NIT, net indirect tax. Now dear student, if you see that net indirect tax, here we have given indirect tax is given here, but actual the net indirect tax is not given. So now what we will do here is that we will subtract indirect taxes, because NIT is nothing but indirect taxes minus subsidies. So now we do not have the value of net indirect taxes. So the values here given is GST, that is indirect taxes, plus subsidies. So now what we will do to find out, calculate net indirect tax, we will subtract indirect taxes minus subsidies. So we will put here as NDP at FC plus depreciation plus NFIA plus in bracket we will subtract indirect taxes from subsidies. Indirect tax minus subsidies. So after putting these values, you can solve the question. So now NDP at FC we have calculated is around 900 crores. Now depreciation, or you have to remember dear student that depreciation, another name for depreciation here is consumption of fixed capital. Consumption of fixed capital, that is around 50. So 900 plus 50. Now net factor income earned from abroad. Net factor income earned from abroad here is NFIA, which is given around, net factor income earned from abroad is around 10. Plus now indirect taxes here GST is given around 90 minus subsidies is around 20. So 20. Now if we calculate this, we will get the value around 1030 rupees in crore. So this will be our gross national product at market price. So before leaving the lecture, dear students, please memorize these basic concepts, the three basic concepts or the three basic aggregates related to the calculation of national income, which I have already taught you in the earlier videos. So please memorize those concepts very clearly, so that further such questions will be on your fingertips. You can easily answer these questions, and mostly these conversions are very important. These aggregates, that what we have to calculate, how we have to calculate, what we need to extract from these questions, what we have to calculate. So for that you have to memorize these basic aggregates concept, these aggregate concept by heart, so that you can calculate any questions which will come in your examination. So in the next class we will learn about the expenditure method. We will proceed with expenditure method, and many of these questions will be provided to you by PDF, and please make sure that you at least do these questions regularly, and do it regularly on your notebook, and maintain your fair notebook. Thank you and have a nice day.